We're going to start off with Dr. Jeff Savell. And I probably need to, he's got a new title. I probably want to make sure we get it correct for Dr. Savell. Now, Dr. Vice Chancellor and Dean for Agriculture and Life Sciences. Everyone knows Dr. Savell from Texas A&M University, a long storied career there in meat science. We appreciate you being here and being part of the program. Michaela, Clowser, Mick, which I met her parents this morning. Found out lots about her family, and they're pretty darn awesome. We have a lot of folks in common. We appreciate those. They're actually going to talk to us about the beef quality survey. And I'm going to turn probably to Dr. Savell.
Hey, it's good to be here with you today. And Michaela and I are glad to be here to talk about the National Beef Quality Audit and the 2022 version of this. So we're going to tag team. It's a way to try to present some of the data and some of the findings of this. So we're glad to be here with you to be able to do that. So my lead off is really to kind of talk about how did we ever get into this program 30 years ago? And a lot of it started with Chuck Lambert. And many of you know of Chuck Lambert or remember Chuck working originally at the National Cattlemen's Association before it became the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And then in the early 2000s, he worked in USDA as one of the chief economists. He wrote a paper. It was actually at the International Stockman School where it was presented. I've got a copy of that paper from the old days that was called Lost Opportunities in Beef. And what he did is he went through and said, what is it that we lose as an industry when you don't have a cow that gets bred and doesn't have a calf? You know, what happens if you have, death loss in the packing plant? What happens if you have too many yield grade 4s and 5s? All those different things. And he came up with something that it was a $12 billion loss during the year. He put it at about $458 per head. And that really kind of started the whole process of thinking about what is it, where are the losses in the industry and what can be done to retrieve those, and kind of thinking about quality. The 1991 beef quality audit, National Beef Quality Audit, talked about the U.S. cattle industry cannot expect improvements in prices for its products or byproducts when quality doesn't warrant such increases. And so this was the start. We've been in a 30-year process of this to understand a little bit more about what is going on from beef production, beef products, and kind of thinking about the end products more for this. So I'm going to go ahead and have Michaela come up, and she's going to kind of go through her section, then I'll come back up here and talk about some of the findings.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Savell. I think everyone can hear me. I think the mic is working for me. Oh, there we go. Nope, not working. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So I'm going to first discuss the interview phase. As you can see here, the quality audit is broken into 3 phases. First, that interview phase of these big buyers of beef. And then phase 2, which Dr. Savell will discuss more, is that in-plant data collection. And then we have a strategy session where industry stakeholders and representatives, researchers all come together and discuss the findings of the National Beef Quality Audit. So interviews, the objective of these interviews are to interview the employees of packers, further processors, retail, food service, and these government and trade organizations on kind of where we are winning and where we are losing as an industry. So here are our total interviews. We like to have an even distribution of these interviews. However, you can see we have a little bit more of the government and trade organizations. However, a good representation of all these companies were represented. So we always like to start out by asking what type of cattle some of these companies purchase when they purchase live cattle. As you can see, predominantly beef. The beef cattle are purchased, and then dairy, and then something unique this year that I wanted to highlight. Okay. Okay, good. Something unique this year that I wanted to highlight is that beef on dairy companies did report back to us that they were purchasing beef on dairy cattle. This is the first audit that this has been reported, so we do not have a trend year over year, just something I wanted to highlight for everyone. So what does the term cattle genetics mean to your company? We ask a lot of questions in these interviews. They take about 45 to 60 minutes, asking anything from food safety to customer satisfaction to weight and size. So I just wanted to pull this one question about cattle genetics to highlight for everyone. As you can see, predominantly, these companies equate quality genetics with improving the herd and producing a higher quality product. So when looking back at the 2016 audit, these companies associated genetics with breed and breed characteristics. So we've come a long way in a short amount of time about these companies seeing the importance of cattle genetics, which is great here at this conference. So now I'm going to kind of breeze through a SWOT analysis, both for Fed and our market cow and bull sectors. So when asked, what changes has your company witnessed since the 2016 audit for the Fed side, knowledge of these animal welfare programs has dramatically increased. So that is those beef quality assurance programs, as well as efficiency. That was a big win, and a takeaway that we saw is that these companies have seen that our industry is more efficient when comparing back to 2016. Strengths, product quality, which Dr. Savell will touch more on that in the implant data research when discussing choice and prime. Opportunities, you can kind of see sprinkled throughout here. Changing consumer is also in there. So this is a great opportunity for us to continue to educate our consumers and continue our education efforts as our consumer changes. Potential threats, environmental concerns, and activists are highlighted here. This is something that we'll discuss more here in a couple of slides during the sustainability portion of this. So impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So something about this audit is that it was done during a very specific time under extraordinary circumstances. So it's something that we have to discuss whenever we discuss the 2022 quality audit. Just going to highlight the positives. We all know that beef performed and saw those photos of the empty cases in the grocery stores right next to the full cases of meat alternatives and fake meat. Negatives, I think we're all aware of the laundry list that came out of this: labor struggles, supply chain issues, social concerns, and market volatility. Sustainability goals. So each quality audit, we ask questions pertaining to sustainability. However, something unique about this audit is that it was our first time we received responses back. So when asked if your company has sustainability goals, the overwhelming answer was yes. However, when asked what are the sustainability goals for these companies, the focus was environment. This is pretty interesting because our consumer market research identifies that our end consumers equate sustainability with animal welfare. So just wanted to call that out and highlight that. So the SWOT analysis for market cow and bull, the image of the cow and bull industry has improved. So that's really good. Going forward, that we see that the total image of the market cow and bull sector has improved for our customers and our consumers. Strengths, something to highlight is secondary value. You know, these market cow and bulls do provide primals and subprimals to our supply chain. So Dr. Savell will talk more about this in his section. Weaknesses, however, I wanted to highlight foreign objects. We'll discuss this towards the end of the presentation. It is something that we heard both on the Fed and market cow and bull side of things. It's still an issue, and it's being called out more in packing plants. So it was reported that this is a weakness for the market cow and bull sector. So with the foreign objects being an issue, producer education is a priority. I know that the beef quality assurance team is looking at creating additional resources and communicating these efforts with the industry. However, a theme throughout here is that there is more knowledge of these animal welfare programs within the industry, such as BQA. So conclusions, eating quality is a market expectation and is directly attributed to high quality genetics. This is both important for our domestic and export markets. Sustainability is primarily viewed as an environmental issue, and branded beef programs continue to increase in popularity, which Dr. Savell will discuss. Market cow and bulls, the image of the market cow and bull sector has improved over the last 5 years. However, since the image has improved, however, there is still more efforts to be done with producer education and in communicating with producers in that market cow and bull sector. And secondary value for those market cows and bulls were called out. So now we're going to switch over to phase 2, which is in the implant data collection. Dr. Savell has a lot of information to share here. Before I pass it off to him, I wanted to quickly highlight the BQA transportation. So this is for fed. So these are predominantly those professional cattle haulers. This is the first time, this is the first audit that a BQA question was asked. And as you can see, over 90% were familiar and certified for BQAT, and that's due to market signals from the packers. So we've gotten some industry buy-in and view that as a win. But other than that, Dr. Savell, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the last audit was the first time that we really looked at mobility in the Fed side. And that was, if you remember, probably in the early 20 teens, I don't know if that's the right way to call that. There was some concern about mobility. There was some concern about mobility with some of the cattle, whether they were too heavy, some of the growth promoters. There was all kinds of things going on about mobility. So we started evaluating it in 2016 and continued it on here in 2022. And if you can see, we're using the 4-point scale here, where one, in measuring the cattle coming off the trailer, out of the trucks, coming out and have a chance to be able to watch them walk for a little bit before they're evaluated. And in this case, we saw slightly lower mobility 1, although mobility 1 obviously is moved with ease and everything there, and a little bit more on mobility 2, which is a little bit more of a stiffness type. Now, as Michaela mentioned, this was supposed to be the 2021 audit, and it is now the 2022 audit because we had a couple of constraints with COVID, and part of those constraints were, when could you get back into the plants? Because during that time, a lot of the plants were not letting anybody else in. And we had to, and then also because cattle were backed up so much, we didn't want to get an artificial evaluation of having cattle that probably weren't as timely marketed as what they needed to be. So that doesn't mean that there aren't still some cattle that are a little bit too big during that time period that we may have gotten. It's never going to be perfect at any time that you're measuring this, but I think still for the most part, we had great mobility scores on this. This has been of interest in more recent audits of just kind of looking at hide color. We always measure that. We measure a lot of things. And remember, everything, we can't cover everything we measure in the program today. And you'll see that in the scientific papers, and you'll see those things. But it's been interesting to just kind of do hide color. And you can see here the 62.3% that were black, 12.34% that were Holstein colored. Now in 2016, that number was bigger. It was about 20%. So we're thinking that number has been diluted a little bit with beef on dairy in that. And so as we start going through here in that, and so it isn't that the black cattle have increased, but we know that has decreased. So again, trying to figure out some of those things there. We left this slide in because we wanted to show where we were on just black-hided cattle, since this Beef Improvement Federation, you're here talking about genetics, you're worried about breeds, all kinds of things, just to show you this trend over time. In 2020, we had 45.1% of the cattle that were black-hided, then 56, and then it's been kind of flat since that time. And that may be the case that, we don't know if that's maxed out or whatever that number will be, but it's been interesting just following that, just kind of get a feel for what kinds of cattle are coming to slaughter. One of the things that we've done, we've looked at presence of horns, and this one has no horns. So this could be dehorned or it could be polled. for them to have horns, they have to have at least an inch is what we do from that standpoint. So I think you can see kind of a increase in the number that have no horns at that point. And again, with the number of black cattle, if those are polled, then again, we expect those numbers might be associated with that. And I think our concern about horns has always been bruising, any kind of animal handling kinds of things that would be associated with that from the fed cattle side there. Speaking of bruising, we were concerned that we did pick up more bruising in this audit than we did in the previous. And so if you can see that this is the number with no bruises, and the next slide will show you kind of severity in that. Now, it wasn't so much, and I'll just do this one because it has some severity in there. So if you can look at minimum number is slightly down, but that's at the expense of major, which is 4, 5, and 6 on this. Our thought is that probably with the cattle being bigger, that we're having more struggles with getting them in and out of trucks, getting them in and out of plants, getting in and around where you've got more places get banged up. And so we know that as we've seen some of the newer packing plants that have come on board, they have been built with a little bit more space. We haven't dealt with that on trucks yet, but I mean, we have to think about that. But, you know, thinking about that is the cattle are bigger, we have to be able to accommodate them. I don't think that and I think we see a lot of the bruises that are along the back area. So again, thinking about anything that they could rub on, hit as they come along there. We talked about last night, Josh, we talked about also some of the, you know, backup gates and such. If you get some of that on the round sometimes, if they're going through chute, all of a sudden they start backing up, and you've got the gates there to keep them from going back. Are they doing anything there? So just a concern that we have, and just hope that we can kind of take a look at that a little bit more. I don't think it's from mishandling. I think today where we are on animal welfare, where you go to the plants, I mean, they're being evaluated obviously by USDA for animal handling, but they're also being evaluated by a lot of third party, you know, audits about animal welfare. And so I think from that standpoint, we're not seeing anything that you would think about what I'd call mishandling related to that. The number of certified programs, we always ask, you know, how many certified programs do you have? And so for those that are not in this area, then the number one certified program that would be around in North America right now would be certified Angus beef. And so you can see 14.7% of the programs there. You see a little bit of grass fed, you see a little bit in-house and natural. The G programs, USDA Agriculture Marketing Service has what's called a G schedule, and that's for all these programs. And it changes monthly. So I didn't look at it today, see how many, but that would be obviously certified Angus beef would be the biggest one, but that might be Walmart beef. That might be Sterling Silver. That might be Chairman's Reserve. There's a lot of them that are under the G schedule for Angus, then they have their own Angus program or other programs that might be present. So almost always somebody's got like a CAB type program, and then maybe another in-house or another one that might be a G program that might be for their specific program. One of the great things that I think we've seen here is the changes in prime and choice over time. And I think about the great work that your organization has done over these years trying to improve the quality of beef, and where you see marbling so much more measured today as far as EPDs, all the type of things that you guys are involved with. And you can see over here in 2022 that it was 76% prime and choice. And actually at that point, prime was 7.5%. Probably the year before that, there were times for many months that prime was running at 10%. I didn't know I'd live long enough to ever see anything where you'd have 10% prime ever in that. And for years, you'd always see people that you'd go to a restaurant somewhere that have, hey, we got prime. It's so rare. It's only 3% of beef would be prime. You'd see that a lot of times. Then all of a sudden we're up here at some high level in that. And you can see the changes over that time period within that. You've got to have some pretty good genetics to make that work, and management, but obviously it starts with genetics. And congratulations to you guys that are involved in that. Carcass weight distribution, you know, over time, there's no question that weights have increased. And Andy King and I were talking about this earlier when we were talking about what used to be a discount. You know, I remember for many years, we had 6 to 9 weight where the cattle, 600, 900 pounds, they would be kind of that average, or 550 to 850 for a while. Anything below that was discount, anything above that. And then this chart that has just moved, the bell-shaped curve keeps moving over. And now we're thinking about over here with the 1049 and 1050, 1099, that might be some of the discount rates within that, but no question. And if you see over here in the top right, we're up about 27 pounds, and this is for all carcasses, 886 pounds. In that case, that's both steers and heifers. So steers are going to be more than 900 pounds. The heifers be less than that within that. Ribeye area, we use this when this is in square centimeters. So for the Canadians, we got this all right here. And so for those of you from the United States, the 91 square centimeters is 14.1 square inches. So just kind of give you a feel for that. But no question, we've seen weights increase over time, and we've seen ribeye areas that have obviously increased over time. Yield grade 4s and 5s. You know, the other thing I was talking to Andy, we used to say, and I love what Andy said earlier, he said, you know, you say, well, had to fit the box. Everything's going in a box today. Everything in the plant, everything's going into a box. They're figuring out how to make that work, even if they have to cut it up into smaller pieces and such. Nothing's going out the door like it was years ago. Nobody's shipping yield grade 4s and 5s out to further fab in that. That business is gone. So they're making it all work. And we don't, even though we had a higher number of yield grade 4s and 5s this time, none of the feedback we got on phase 1, none of the other things was back here saying you're producing cattle that are too fat. It's almost kind of like it's working. And so again, is there still room for improvement? Yes. But is it one of those big concerns that we heard 30 years ago where it was like all of them are too fat, we got to get the fat off of them? We don't seem to hear that as much today. On the market cow and bull, a couple things. You want me to go ahead and say this one, or you will say it from there? This your slide here. This is the certified, not certified on the BQA program, and you saw 63.6. Probably not near as much because, again, these are people bringing the cattle to the plant. And in this case, you're going to get more on the market cow and bull. More individual farmer ranchers are going to bring up there versus the big trucks that tend to be bringing to the fed steer and heifer. So a smaller number, but again, making some progress in that area. Mobility, this is just looking at beef versus dairy. And you can see a little bit more concern on the dairy side compared to the beef, as you might expect. They're going to be confined more. They're going to have a little bit more. And probably one of the reasons they may be coming to town may be some mobility problems. And so go and get them out before they can't move very well. This one concern we've had too is, again, with timely marketing, trying to make sure that the cattle have sufficient muscle. And so these are those that we classify as inadequately muscled, which is basically on a 5-point scale if they're 1 or a 2 on that. Now, again, not only do we have COVID lingering over here, we had droughts lingering too. So, you know, you can't just all of a sudden say, well, they need to be more muscle over here. And if you don't have adequate feed for them, that ain't going to help from that standpoint. But they're just one of the concerns we had. And then I think we don't have a slide on body condition score, but a little bit lower than what you might expect. Same thing. If we got drought conditions, we would expect they're not going to be as fleshy as what they might have. We didn't show brands on the fed side, but we want to show you brands on the cow side. And you can see in this case that we have only 15.7% brands in here. We also did not put in here the number of EID and other kinds of ID. There's all kinds of things we collect on that that's kind of interesting, but I think we've seen an uptick in EID, which might be expected, and you know, probably a downtick a little bit more on hot iron brands. With horns, in this case, we've got it reported the opposite way. So in this case, it would be 91% without horns, which again would be kind of a big number when we think about a lot of those cows that may not necessarily, if they had horns, be dehorned somewhere back in that process compared to steers and heifers. Now with our dairy influence, now we end up with obviously the Holstein over here, but you would end up with about The majority of them then being the Holstein pattern, and then about a third of them be black, and then the rest of them be one of the other breed types that would give us those different colors associated with that. One concern early on the cows is how many of them would have arthritic joints. And so that was a big number early on, 1999, and even in 2007, and we're kind of stabilized right now with 1.3 and 1.3 on that. So that's good. Arthritic joints have to be trimmed out, which causes major value loss for not only the joint, but the company meat associated with that. And then in the bruises, this is again the no bruises there, that number is greatly increased in the 2007, and it's been about that same, down a little bit, but just kind of give you an idea of better probably handling over the market cow and bull. This slide just kind of indicates, again, the severity, and you can kind of see a downward slope on severity of bruises. So again, we think that that's great news from that standpoint. One of the things I think that's always been a challenge when you talk to cattle producers is this, to help them understand that when they have a market cow and bull, that's just not all hamburger meat. And, part of this is that virtually the better condition that you have, the more muscle you have, the more cuts will come out of that. And so we just ask everybody, so what are you getting? Well, here's just kind of a list. And the only number on here, chuck roll, which probably would have all gone into ground chuck anyway. Everything else is pretty high. So the more quality you've got, especially if you get to the white cows, the white fat cows that be up in the Midwest or Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, areas like that, a lot of that's going to go into food service and be used quite well there. So again, a lot of all this has got good value, and we just got to remember that these cows and bulls have a life after they leave the farm, and that product gets into the marketplace. So Michaela is going to take us home.
Thanks, Dr. Savell. So I'm going to touch a little bit on food safety. I wanted to mention first, so in that interview phase, we asked, what does food safety mean to your company? And something that really stood out for us in that strategy session is that it is a way of business and it is assumed. So that's a huge win for the industry. However, there still are areas of improvement, like I mentioned, in particularly those that foreign material, foreign objects. So this is for the fed sector. As you can see, something else I wanted to mention is that we did not ask for plants to report on this. This was volunteered to us. These surveys were volunteered to us. So as you can see, a little over 41% reported that they did not have any foreign objects. However, the reason why this doesn't add up to 100%, the remaining were able to report multiple times. So they were able to say that they found buckshot and needles and wire, or vice versa. And the way that these plants are able to detect foreign objects is with metal detection, X-ray, and magnets. And we saw this as a large issue in those cow and bull plants. So as you can see here, 100% of plants reported that they found buckshot and birdshot. And of that, 50% of these plants reported that there were customer complaints. So something that was discussed is that this is not necessarily a new issue. I know that back in the early 2000s, there were campaigns to address the foreign material issues. I believe it was Get the Lead Out. I think that was mentioned. And so this isn't anything new. However, there is more attention being drawn to this. So many of you may remember the Pilgrim's Pride recall several years ago when 3 million pounds of chicken were recalled due to blue plastic contamination. So once that took place, FSIS then began looking closer at those customer complaints. So plants always collect customer complaints. However, they might not have been looked at as closely. However, we're seeing that they are looked at more today. So with that, we are focusing on those producer education efforts. I know the National BQA team will be communicating this with producers and creating resources to address this issue. So just wanted to do a quick call out that this was a large finding that we found for this specific audit. So with that, I want to acknowledge all of the universities and PIs and grad students that we worked with. It is a massive research project, and we really appreciate the collaborators. And Dr. Savell has been a part of the National Beef Quality Audit since the first one in 1991. So he has obviously a wealth of knowledge in history. So wanted to thank everyone for that. And with that, we have more information at bqa.org. We have 2 4-pagers, one summarizing the fed sector, one summarizing those market cow and bulls, as well as a cattleman to cattleman episode on YouTube. So feel free, if you want more information right now, feel free to look into that. But we'll have more information coming on, an executive summary and additional resources. So with that, I think we can take some questions. If Dr. Savell, if you want to join me again.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Savell, could you comment in on ribeye size, particularly as it relates to, obviously, market weights have gone up, ribeye size is of course going up. We've historically talked about portion size and meeting the needs of retailers and consumers. So where are we at there? And maybe what's the implications for a group like this when we think about genetics? And obviously genetics plays a big role in terms of muscling and particularly finish endpoint, that kind of
Mhm. You know, nobody in food service calls us and says, we want bigger ribeyes, as you just alluded to. And the challenge we have on portioning, and again, a lot of the food service is sold by weight. And so again, a 12 ounce, 16 ounce, whatever that might be, and the concern of getting those too thin to do that. But yet, even with that, we're still kind of proceeding upward, because I think all the market signals continue to be more on weight, not on size. So everybody's rewarded. And I was interested yesterday in some of the data that was presented, looking at, you know, weaning weights and yearly weight. I mean, all these things are upward. And so it isn't that they just magically appear at the packing plant that way. Obviously, there's a lot of things in the system that go back up through there. In the ribeye area, for certain, there are merchandising opportunities we've had where you can take the spinalis off, which is a lot of people call that the meat candy, you know, and market that separately. And then you've got, as you get towards the chuck, that eye muscle gets smaller, and then you could get something a little bit thicker from that standpoint. But we're not seeing that used very much. I think Costco will see a lot of those. They'll pull the spinalis off and kind of use that as a separate deal. One interesting set of data that I've looked at on the past audit, the higher the quality grade, the smaller the ribeye. And that probably makes sense. Now, you know, so Select, Select has a larger eye than a Choice, and Choice has a larger eye than Prime. So we're probably getting a little downward pressure, still at 14 inches overall, but probably if you're at the Prime, that might be, and I need to look at that data, we might be at a 13 something. We might be at 15 on Select. And so that probably is helping us a little bit where we don't have as much pushback from that. But it is a concern, and I don't know, there's no, other than merchandising right now, I'm trying to think of that, which National Cattlemen's Beef Association has done a lot of work on that. We seem to be at a standstill. I think on retail, they're just cutting and selling it by weight. And so they can cut it an inch thick, and then whatever that weight is just whatever the weight is. And people, you know, tend to go. And it hadn't seemed to affect too much in the marketplace, other than somewhere in there, you pick up that package and you do sticker shock when it's got a $12.99 per pound, and then it's times a whole bunch. And they go, oh my gosh, put it back and get something else. Scott, that's not a good answer to you, but it is a concern. But I don't know what else we can do, because still everything's pushing more to larger, heavier, which brings larger.